Let me read from Mark 9, 14 through 29, if you'd like to follow. And when he came to his disciples, he saw a great multitude about them, and the scribes questioning with them. And straightway all the people, when they beheld him, were greatly amazed, and running to him, saluted him. And he asked the scribes, "What question ye with them?" And one of the multitude answered and said, "Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. And wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth, and he gnasheth with his teeth, and pineth away. And I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not." He answered them and said, "O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him unto me." And they brought him unto him. And when he saw him, straightway the spirit tear him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming. And he asked his father, "How long is it ago since this came upon him?" And he said, "Of a child. And oftentimes it had cast him into the fire and into the waters to destroy him. But if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said unto him, "If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth." And straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief." When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, "Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him, and enter no more into him." And the spirit cried and rent him sore, and came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he was come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why cannot we cast him out?" And he said unto them, "This kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting."
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, church. Good morning. And once again, we can tell that Peoria is not the vacation capital of the world with 3-day weekends like this and stuff. You know, Memorial Day is like what Rick was talking about just a few moments ago. It's a time that we as a nation, we honor all the men, all the women who have died defending this country and giving us the freedoms that we enjoy. And I'm not trying to be controversial here, okay? I'm not trying to rattle any feathers or anything like that, but I've seen this on Facebook over the last week or so with some people, and I've heard it said a lot of times that, you know, if you go and you're using this weekend to go on picnics, or if you're using this weekend to have barbecues and have families and friends over for barbecues, or it's the opening of swimming pools, you know, all of that sort of thing, well then you're not very patriotic. And I believe in talking to soldiers even today, that many of them will tell you that's the reason they gave their lives, is so that we could enjoy these freedoms. That we could have the freedom to go about and to have the picnics, that we can have the freedom to go about and to enjoy swimming pools and to do all of those kind of things. You remember when 911 happened And some of us remember 911. I keep thinking, some of these guys, they weren't even born at that time. But I can remember President Bush getting on television and encouraging us not to stay in our houses. I don't know about you, but you just wanted to pull the drapes. You wanted to keep the lights off. We were kind of hunkered down. We were fearful. We were afraid. And President Bush said, you know what? We are free. You are free. Do not let the enemy win. And I wonder, as we remember what Jesus Christ did on that cross, He took your sin. Didn't just take it. He became your sin. He became my sin. He became my sin that would doom me for an eternity separated from God in hell. And because of His resurrection, He had victory over death. And that's our two enemies, isn't it? Sin and death. And Jesus, He took care of both of those. And when the resurrection came about, Jesus gave us freedom. But I wonder what God thinks about us. When we live our lives as if Jesus did not die on that cross and as if Jesus was not resurrected. The enemy is fine with you, with me, with us getting in a gathering like this. The enemy is fine with us coming together and singing songs to God and singing songs to encourage one another. The enemy's fine with us getting together and praying together. The enemy's fine with us getting together and celebrating the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus through the Lord's Supper. The enemy is fine with all of those things. The enemy is fine with us getting in the Word together like we're doing right now. He's fine with all of those things as long as we leave this building still chained by whatever circumstance it is that is robbing us of life. You see, Jesus said, and I've used this passage in the past, in John 10:10, Jesus said, my purpose is to give my people a rich and satisfying life. Jesus, Norman, He said, that's why I've come. I've come to give you a rich and satisfying life. That's His purpose. And when we hear the word rich, a lot of times we may think, He's talking about money, He's talking about wealth, He's talking about having a lot of stuff or whatever. No, He's talking about a rich life, a life that is full. Some of the translations say an abundant life, a life that is overflowing, a life that is satisfying. So I want to ask you today, can you say about your life today, Monday, especially when Monday rolls around, is your life satisfying? Is the life you are living today a rich and satisfying life? Because Jesus also said, after saying His purpose for coming, He said the enemy has a purpose as well. And he has come to steal, kill, and destroy. He has come to rob you. of what Jesus came to give you. Jesus came to give us life. A rich life, a satisfying life. And our enemy is wanting to destroy that. So I want to say something, and in no way is this intended to hurt, because Jesus is not about hurting us. Jesus is about blessing us. He loves you. He loves me. But if you're not living a rich and satisfying life right now, and if you're going through your weeks, and I mean, you're just struggling just to keep your head above the water, week in and week out, year after year after year, who are you listening to? Am I listening to Jesus? Or am I listening to the enemy? You see, Jesus, when he came down off the Mount of Transfiguration here, in the passage that Mark read, and thank you for reading that, Mark. I'm just going to highlight a few things. I see Jesus get irritated. Sometimes we may not think Jesus got irritated. He got irritated. I think he was irritated here. When you look at verse 19, the crowd after Jesus and Peter, James, and John, they came down off of that mountain, and there was this ruckus that was going on, and there was a little boy that was demon-possessed by an evil spirit, and the spirit would throw him on the ground, and he would foam at the mouth, and he was just being whooped by this evil spirit. And so when Jesus came up, he said, hey, what's going on here? The dad came up and he said, hey, I asked your disciples to cast this evil spirit out, and they couldn't do it. And Jesus said to them in verse 19, you faithless people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. You can see the frustration of Jesus. Jesus wasn't frustrated with the evil spirit. He wasn't frustrated that, oh man, here we go again. Here's this evil spirit again. I've got to take care of this evil spirit all over again. He wasn't frustrated with that. Jesus knew what he could do with that evil spirit. What he was frustrated with was the lack of faith of his people. He said, you faithless people, how long must I put up with you? How about you? How about me? How long are we going to live our lives in mediocrity? How long are we going to live our lives being chained? Having our enemy rob from us what Jesus Christ did at the resurrection. How long? And I don't know if you caught this when Mark was reading in verse 21. Well, in verse 20, when Jesus walked up to the dad and the little boy, boom, this evil spirit got a hold of this little boy. It threw him on the ground. He starts foaming at the mouth. He's in total control of this little boy. Jesus looks at the little boy, and you would expect that Jesus would go out of him. But did you notice what Jesus did? Andrea, he looks at the little boy, and then he turns to the dad. And he asked the dad, how long has your boy been like this? Do you find that odd? I mean, here's this little boy, this evil spirit is just knocking the snot out of them. And Jesus is looking at him, and instead of going, okay, this is it, evil spirit, you're done, you're out of here, instead of saying that, he turns from the little boy and he looks at the dad. How long has this been going on? Jesus came to do more than just snap his finger and to take care of situations. He came to change hearts. And so what Jesus was doing when he turned away from this little boy who was in this battle and was chained by this evil spirit and turned to the dad, he was bringing the dad into the story. And he's also bringing you and me into the story. Because what happens next is going to determine whether or not the next time something comes up in this man's life, is he going to trust Jesus? Or is he going to automatically default to unbelief? And the same is true for you and me. Probably some of us, if I keep talking about Facebook enough, we're going to quit posting on Facebook. Because it just blows me away that us as believers, that you know, man, something happens in our life and we just fall apart. It's just woe is me. And then we get through that situation and we're kind of coasting through life. Things are going good. And then boom, just as soon as something else happens, what happens? All the wheels come off and everything is woe is me all over again. Where's our faith? Where's our trust in Jesus? You see, the dad finally asked Jesus, if you can. You know, my boy, if you can. And do you see how Jesus responded in verse 23? Jesus said, what do you mean, if I can? If you have paper, you can flip back to Mark chapter 1. We're just going to run through the first 8 chapters here real quick, nothing major. If you're on your phone looking at your scripture that way, you may have a little bit tougher time and may just want to listen. But when you look at Mark chapter 1, right off the bat in verse 21, Jesus cast out this evil spirit in a man that's in the synagogue. And then when you get down to verse 29, Jesus goes to Simon Peter's house, and Simon Peter's mom has a fever, or mother-in-law has a fever, and Jesus heals her of that fever, and then that evening around sunset, the whole town brought all of their sick to Jesus. And he healed them all. Then when you get to the end of chapter 1 there, in verse 40, there's this man with leprosy. Jesus heals this man with leprosy. Chapter 2, there's a man that is paralyzed in the first part. And he has 4 buddies that bring him on a mat, and they lower him through this roof right to the feet of Jesus. And Jesus heals him of his paralysis. And the man gets up and he walks out of the room just singing and dancing. In chapter 3, Jesus again, there's a man with a deformed hand in the synagogue. And Jesus healed this man of his deformed hand. In chapter 4, there's a storm that comes up. The water's breaking over the boat. The boat is about to sink. Jesus is asleep in the boat. The disciples wake him up. Jesus stands up and he says, peace, be still. Silence. He said to the storm, and boom, everything became completely still. They were safe. In chapter 5, there was a demon-possessed man that was possessed by thousands of demons, and he was stark raving mad. He had an encounter with Jesus. Jesus cast out all of those demons. They went into some swine, and they went over the cliff, killing 2,000 pigs. In chapter 5, in verse 21, there was a synagogue ruler by the name of Jairus, whose daughter had died, had gotten sick, and she died. Jesus went to his house, and he healed this little girl, and he raised her up from the dead, gave her back to the dad. And then along with that, there was a woman who had a bleeding issue for 12 years. She had gone to all the doctors. She had spent all of her money trying to find relief from this bleeding disorder that she had. She just simply touched the hem of Jesus' robe, and boom, the bleeding stopped. She was healed completely. When you get to chapter 6, I'm sure I've skipped over some, but he fed 5,000 people. Well, matter of fact, it was just 5,000 men, not counting the women and children, with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. That's mind-blowing. And then there was another storm. And Jesus is on the shore. And the disciples are in the middle of the lake, and they're struggling with the storm. And so what does Jesus do? Swims? No, that's right. He walked on water. Way to go, Mason. He walked on water. How incredible is that? And then you have in chapter 7, you had the faith of this Gentile woman whose little girl was sick. And she didn't feel like that they were even worthy for Jesus to come and to heal her. But Jesus healed this one who felt like that she was such an outcast. And then in verse 31, there was this man that was deaf, and he had this speech impediment, and Jesus gave him back his hearing, and he also touched his tongue to where he was able to speak clearly. In chapter 8, he feeds 4,000 people with 7 loaves and a few small fish. And then also in chapter 8, there was a man that was blind, and Jesus touched his eyes and gave him back his sight. That's a lot of stuff there, isn't it? And so Jesus asked this dad, and he's asking those people that are standing there, and he's even asking his own disciples, you're asking me if I can. What about you? What about me? How do you read your Bible? Do we read through all of that I just went through as some good little stories? Or do I realize that this is the Jesus that I call Lord? This is the one who, when I was baptized into Him, I crucified myself, man. I killed myself. Because I knew on my own strength, on my own power, I would always be enslaved to the enemy. But Jesus gives me freedom. And Jesus said in verse 23, anything is possible if a person believes. What is anything? Some of us have been so chained and enslaved by the enemy, robbing us of life, that we've accepted it. And it's become the norm. And the choice is going to be yours. Because Jesus said anything is possible for the person that believes. He didn't say anything is possible for the person that is at the church gathering every Sunday. Or everything is possible for the person who's been baptized the longest. Or everything is possible for the person who has family, that has family way back, generation after generation after generation, has been a part of God's kingdom. It's not that. He said it is possible for anyone. It is possible for you if you believe. So the question becomes, do I believe? Do I believe what I read here that is God-breathed? Do I believe? Do you believe? Do I believe in the power of the resurrection and what the resurrection represents? God, through Jesus and the resurrection, is restoring that which the enemy stole from us in the Garden of Eden, which is life. Am I still living my life, though, with chains and burdens? One thing Walt always has asked me with sermons, through my 11 years here, I can remember many, many times back there, and he'll go, "Man, that was a good sermon, David, but now what?" Remember those? Now what? Jesus gives us the now what. Because the disciples came up to Jesus and they asked Jesus, why couldn't we cast that demon out? Why couldn't we free that little boy? And Jesus replied, and Mark, when I saw that you were reading this scripture, I was happy because you were reading it out of the King James, and I'll tell you in just a moment why. Because Jesus replied in verse 29, Jesus told his disciples, this kind can be cast out only by prayer. Now, I grew up with the King James, as probably many of you did. When I was going to Harding, 30-something years ago now, almost 40, wow. I did all my memory, I'm old. No, older, not old, just older. Yeah. I remember doing all of my memorization work out in the King James. It was easier because the language was different. Some of our translations, the one I'm reading from right now, would be very difficult to memorize because it's like trying to memorize the newspaper with our language. The language was so different, it made it easier for me to memorize. But one of the things the King James translation did was, from a different manuscript, it picked up a manuscript that had prayer and fasting. Now, sometimes we freak out over that because, my Bible just says prayer. So that's why I don't trust my Bible. No, you can trust your Bible. Prayer and fasting are cousins. You'll see prayer and fasting together all through Scripture. You'll see it all through the book of Acts where they got together and they were praying and they were fasting together. It's not something completely polar opposite. Jesus didn't say, okay, this kind can only come out through prayer and having 5 guys, burgers and fries, every Thursday for a month. I mean, you see how opposite that is? That doesn't make any sense. But prayer and fasting makes sense. So what is prayer? And we talked about that some this morning, Terry. What is prayer? Well, let me tell you one thing prayer is not. Well, two things. One thing, prayer is not a wish list. God is not Santa Claus. We don't give a wish list to God. I wish this, I wish that. But also, prayer is not a to-do list. Now, I want you to think about your prayer. And I'm not trying to guilt us or anything like that, but think about your prayers. How many of our prayers are a to-do list for God? God, I need you to do this. God, I need you to do this. God, I need you to be over here. God, you need to be over there. God, I need you to do this for this person. God, I need you here. I mean, we give God all of these to-dos. Think about it. I tell God, I've got a loved one. My brother-in-law, when he was having a heart surgery, God, he's down in this hospital in Houston, Texas. Oh yeah, by the way, God, here's the surgeon. God, here's his name, and I'm praying, Lord, that you will guide his hands during this surgery. And by the way, God, the surgery is going to be at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning. God, be sure that you remember. I mean, I'm trying to tell God that. God already knows the surgeon. God created the surgeon. Right? God knows all of that stuff. He knows about what's going on in our lives and what's going on in the lives of our loved ones. But yet, we constantly give God this to-do list. What prayer is leaning in toward God. Prayer is leaning into God. Prayer is recognizing and leaning in and seeing who God is. I don't have to give God a to-do list. I need to lean into God and recognize who He is. And as I lean toward God, I know that I can trust my loved ones with Him. I've struggled with this years ago. I can remember when I was at a particular church on Wednesday nights, we got to be known as a praying church, which is good. And so we got prayer requests from all over the St. Louis area, seriously. We're supposed to be having Bible study, but I think we spent probably, at least 45 minutes to 50 minutes just with prayer. And 25 minutes of that 50 minutes was spent with us giving information about who we're praying for. So we're sitting there because we all don't know what the person is and what's kind of going on. So we talk about that person, and here's the situation, here's what's going on in their life, and here's what we need to be praying for. And I always wondered and I did this, when I went to pray publicly, I regurgitated everything that we just said. You understand what I'm saying? It's almost like, okay, guys, it's kind of like what we do on Sunday mornings. Okay, guys, is there any prayer requests? And we start giving out these prayer requests, and we talk about what the needs are and what's going on so that we can all be informed, as if God is not present. So then we go to pray, and we go, go like, okay, God, now you can come in the room, and now we're going to pray. And so we just simply repeat everything that had already been said. God already knows all of that. Prayer is leaning in toward God. It's not giving Him a to-do list. And that shortens our prayer life a lot, and allows me to pray for a whole lot more people. I'm going to be honest with you. There are times that I would want to pray for somebody, but I didn't pray for them at that moment because I think I don't have time, because I need to remind God of that whole situation. Hello? I know it's crazy, but don't we do that? And now, if there's something going on with Margaret back there, I can just simply say, you know what, Lord? I trust you with Margaret. I trust you with the ordeal she's going through right now, Lord. Bless her. And then I move right on. You see, prayer is leaning in toward God. Who He is, His greatness, His awesomeness. So what is fasting? Fasting is simply leaning away from the voice of our world. Fasting is leaning away from the voice of our culture. We hear things like prayer and fasting. We think we need to have a seminar. Or we need to have some classes, some studies. We make it too hard. How often should you fast? What should you fast from? Whatever is keeping you from leaning in toward God, you should fast from. So often we get where we binge watch shows, maybe Netflix. So every night we come home, and until we get home and eat dinner and then time to go to bed, we're watching Netflix, some show. Maybe you need to fast for 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, maybe a month from Netflix, so that you can lean toward God and lean away from the voice of our world. Maybe it's social media. We stay on social media. What's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning? Wake up in the morning. Many of us, first thing we do is we grab this phone right here and we turn it on to see what Facebook is saying. Maybe it'd be good for us to fast from that. To lean away from that and lean toward God in prayer, recognizing who God is. It could be hobbies. It could be a number of different things. But here's the thing that Jesus said. Jesus said this kind can be cast out only by prayer. Only by prayer and fasting. Leaning toward God and leaning away from the voice of our world. See, as you lean toward God, He's going to let you know who He is in you and who you are in Him. Many times the voice of the world is going to put labels on you. They're going to put labels on us. And we begin to believe those labels. So So I want to encourage you today. What is it that maybe for some of us in this room right here today, man, you have just been struggling with this and struggling with this and struggling with this, and it just keeps zapping me of my life. Are you ready to let it go? Anything is possible for the one who believes. Do you believe? Lean toward God in prayer. And lean away from our world and all the things that distract us from God. We're going to sing an invitation song, Create in Me a Clean Heart. I guess that's where it starts, right, Ryan? It starts right here with the heart. Is your heart clean? Or is it clothed? Do you need to be clothed? Sing this song as a prayer to God. That's what it is. And as you leave out of here today, let's leave out of here today. And I'm going to lean into God. I'm going to keep my focus on Him. And I'm going to lean away from this stuff that clutters my life, robs me what Jesus came to give. If you need to come for any reason, why don't you come right now to the stage? Create in me a clean heart.